We're at the last stage, I hope, of finishing the blanket before I put it in the washing machine with a towel for its final wet finishing. Last week, I didn't have anything new to show you. All I was doing was fixing mistakes, of which there were plenty, and twisting the ends. I do want to talk a little bit about the last stage or the other end. I have not yet done the other twisted fringe, and I want to have a visual record of how some of the fixes look before I put everything in the washing machine, just so we can both compare and contrast how this all goes. So you may recall from the video where I took the project off the loom that I could not actually unfold the blanket from the fold. That I had one known catch at the beginning end, and this is the beginning end, and I'll tell you in a minute how I know it's the beginning end. Um, and yes, we've got a visitor. Lavender is making her appearance. She loves this blanket. And it's spread out on my bedroom floor right now, and it has been a job of work keeping her off of it, which is necessary because the friend who's getting it is really allergic to cats. Um, so my friend knows that I will wash it, and she knows that she should wash it before she does much else with it. So we're likely to have Lavender poking her adorable little face in again during the course of this video. Okay, so last weekend's work on this blanket was all about the beginning and making some decisions. So when I started weaving on this warp, I wove a block of about 14 inches in with this color of weft. And when I ended, I was getting a bad shed. And in fact, you can see that there are some skips. So I did about 5 inches, and then I said, okay, it's going to be too painful to go any further. So I'm just going to stop. And I knew that I had close to my target for this project. And my target for this project was a blanket 84 inches long, excluding the fringes. So as I was fixing last weekend, I realized that if I made that I had woven something like 93, yes, I had woven 93 inches, and I knew this because I took measurements and wrote everything down. So I knew that if I symmetri symmetri symmetricized, I'm making up words here, that if I made this blanket symmetrical in its color pattern on both ends, uh, 5 inches here, 5 inches here, and then it changes to a lighter blue color, and then it changes to the midnight, and et cetera, et cetera. I knew that if I made everything symmetrical, I would actually save myself a lot of grief because I could just unpick the worst parts where I had the most knots and the most problems weaving at the beginning. So that is what I did. I did not want to cut off all my warp length in of the 14 inches because I needed to reach a place where I didn't have knots in the warp, because knots in the warp when you're doing twisted fringe look horrendous, like beyond awful. So I cut off, and you may recall that when I was trying to deal with the worst warp I've ever wound, or warped on the loom, that I had tied knots to give myself length to tie onto the front apron cord. So all that got trimmed off. I fixed the two catches between the layers. I fixed a really bad problem area, and you might remember this from that video, where just a whole area of my purple weft had not worked properly. It had just it just looked horrendous. So basically, I unpicked up to the beginning of the problem and needle wove back down. And At the moment, it still does not look beautiful. I will freely admit that. But I am hopeful that once this goes through the the gentle agitation of the delicate cycle, that a lot of this will even itself out. And if it doesn't, I have my trusty cheap drugstore pick to finesse things. So I want to show you that this looks better, but not great. And then I've still got long tails for the couple of places where I needed to actually cut in a new length of warp yarn. And I've left long-ish tails any place I had to do that. So here's another one. But you don't want these tails to be more than about an inch long because they will cause problems later. Also, at the center, you may recall I had put in a one gold warp yarn to try and help the turn where the blanket layers were joined. It was not exactly effective. It worked to some extent. And next time I do a double weave blanket, I'm going to, instead of trying for an angle on my weft as it comes off the shuttle, I'm going to try bubbling it because this, uh, uh, my salvaging technique was not great. This is really uneven. And in fact, I took out two more of the green threads here in this center portion, trying to alleviate some of these problems. And where it's really bad, I tried using my pick to even things out. And it just might never be good. This is one of the things you have to grapple with on double width blankets until your salvages are pristine. And I don't know that any of my other fool the end delivery shuttle techniques would have worked beyond what I already did. So I did space out on those last couple of dents on the left side of my reed. I did skip a couple of dents, and I had that gold extra thread in there, and I still had problems. So all those tricks would have worked if my salvage technique with my weft and my end delivery shuttle had been better. So this is one of those live and learn moments that you really, it's not possible to overthink your salvaging technique as you're weaving, because it will override any other tricks you're trying on a double width blanket to try and make this center fold area look better. So this is what this first end looks like. As I said, I trimmed off the knots on the warp, and then I just snipped away at the weft yarns that I wanted to remove, and laboriously, one at a time, uh, trim them off, or remove them from the web of the weaving. Now it's time to do the second end. And I'm looking at, I'm going to say a good 2 hours. Fortunately, I've got a great audiobook to listen to while I do it. And I want you to notice something before I get started. Because I did cut stuff off of the first end of the blanket, when I went to twist the fringe, I'm going to say 7-8 inches of warp length to deal with. Well, as I undo each of these temporary knots, you're going to see that I've got way more than 8 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this down to about 8 inches. Right now, my twisted fringe is about 4 inches to the knot. And if I cut this length down to, I'm going to say 7 inches. I think 7 inches was the number I settled on pre-twisting. I will save myself a lot of effort, because once I get my fringe twister out, if I start twisting this really long length, which is way longer than I want, which is 11 inches long, I'm going to have to twist all this, and that's going to take more time, more effort, more potential pain for my bad shoulder, etc. And why do all that? So it makes more sense to perhaps lay the whole width of this blanket flat, undo all my knots, my temporary knots, trim everything, and then do the fringe twisting. Along the way, I've got a couple of skips that are going to be really simple to fix. So you can see one here, you can see one here. Angle the camera. And again, the easiest way to fix these, especially because they're so close to the end of the weaving, is to just unpick this warp end and needle weave it back to the correct pattern to get rid of these couple of floats. And if I see more of them, I will do that. In the middle of the blanket, if I see any floats, I'm honestly, unless they're really, really obvious, I might just leave them. You would not believe how much effort it takes to spread out a weaving that is this big, and then to go over row by row by row. Here comes Lavender again. You can just see her little paw. Go over row by row by row to see if I've got any more mistakes. And again, because I'm using cotton warp and chenille weft, it might well be that trying to fix a one end float will make it more obvious than just leaving it alone. So wish me luck. And if all goes as planned, later this weekend, I will have another video where I can show you what the blanket looks like after wet finishing. And at that point, I will do a review of this project just to go over what worked, what didn't work. That would be the warp. And talk about what I might change the next time I do another double width blanket, because I do love weaving blankets. They are a lot of fun. They weave up really quickly, especially if I used a fatter yarn, and they make great gifts for people. So stay tuned for more.